Vale, ¿se me oye ya? Vale, ok, vale. Bueno, hago... No tenía pensado hacer directo ahora mismo, ¿vale? Pero un amigo, un buen amigo, me ha recomendado que... abra directo y que me prepare para grabar. Así que estoy grabando. Vamos a ver. Estoy un poco nervioso, ¿vale? Acaban de preparar el lanzamiento ahora mismo. Muchas gracias, Aramis. ¡Ojo! ¡Ojo que lo han buceado! Steam Legacy. Steam Legacy. ¿Vamos a tener varias versiones de Half-Life? Vamos a ver, vamos a ir saltando, ¿vale? De navegador y tal. Vale, no han subido nada. Steam Legacy, tío. Una rama Steam Legacy. Vamos a tener una versión clásica de Half-Life y otra... madre mía, estoy temblando, gente. Estoy temblando. Estoy temblando. Por cierto, tengo la musiquilla puesta de fondo. Un segundito. Sí, vale. Que no tengo ni idea. Creo que voy a quitar la musiquilla y voy a poner algo de Half-Life por aquí. Un segundo, gente. Vale, un buena de la ni de guitar. No sé quién ha donado, muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, pero estoy... vamos a ver, ¿qué hora es? Faltan 4 minutos para el lanzamiento. Vale, ya sabéis que suele lanzar las cosas a las 10 de la mañana, hora de Seattle, ¿vale? Bueno. Lo que tenemos asegurado, ¿vale? Lo que tenemos... Ahora, musiquilla. Lo que tenemos asegurado es que va a ser algo para la deck, ¿vale? Pero no sabemos qué más va a haber. Vamos a ver. Vale, si están haciendo... Están a punto de lanzar el cohete del episodio 2, gente. Mírate todo esto, tío. De golpe, además. Están a punto de lanzarlo. Steam Deck Verified, sí. El verificado de la Steam Deck. Aquí han cambiado la compatibilidad con la Steam Deck. Vale, y lo demás que tenemos aquí cambiado, no tenemos nada por ahora, ¿no? No, por ahí esto nada. Vamos a ver si están posteando algo. Vale, es que lo tengo todo aquí para dar al F5, gente. Vale. Seguiremos esperando. Vamos a ver la tienda. ¡Ay! Bueno. Estoy nervioso. Madre mía, chaval. Tengo un amigo que me ha dicho: Scolcer, abre stream, porque se ha enterado de alguna cosa. Hemos estado viendo algunas cosas. Digo, abre stream y prepárate para grabarlo. Y he montado esto de golpe. O sea, la miniatura es de mierda porque la he montado en 2 minutos. Madre mía, loco. 2 minutos, 2 minutos, 1 minuto para el caso, gente. Se viene una de las mayores troleadas del año. ¿Te imaginas? Hostia, pero esto de Steam Legacy, igual la versión de la deck va aparte. No lo sé, no tengo ni puñetera idea. Madre mía, gente. Madre mía. ¡Ah! Madre mía, tienen que lanzar un vídeo o algo, tío. Tienen que lanzar un vídeo. Muchas gracias, Tacoman, por ese manitazo de arena. Y un licazo, gente. Madre mía. Madre mía, algo nuevo. Lo que primero va a salir es el tweet o algo así, porque lo tendrán programado para que en punto se lance. Tengo también aquí preparar los canales, ¿vale? De YouTube por si acaso lanzan algún tráiler o algo así que lo podamos ver así de primeras. Vale. ¿Vale? ¿Han restaurado lo de ayer? Han restaurado lo de ayer. Consigue Half-Life. Ah, lo que pasa es que no lo puedo ver porque lo tengo comprado. Confirmarme si vais a... Si no tenéis... Si no tenéis... Tal, parece ser que lo han puesto gratis de nuevo, ¿eh? Mira, han arreglado la fecha, que estaba rota. Vamos a ver la página de destacados, a ver si han puesto algo. No. Si busco Half-Life. No. Half-Life 2. Half-Life gratuito. Sí, lo han vuelto a poner. Lo han vuelto a poner. La franquicia Half-Life está rebajada, gente. Half-Life 2 a 0,97 céntimos de euro. Sí, un 90% de descuento. Ok, vale. Y Alex, por cierto, también está... Sí, también está rebajado. Alex al 66%. Dame una paginita especial del aniversario, tío, Valve, por favor. Dame una paginita. Gente, aprovechar que está gratis, hasta el día 20, supongo. Ah, mira esto, sí. Lo han vuelto a... Sí, esto es lo que añadieron ayer, que luego lo cerraron. Supongo porque tenían la plataforma de pagos caída y ahora lo han vuelto a meter. Añadido el SDK, claro, todo. La ownership, el SDK y el juego en base. Vale, tenemos algo nuevo. ¡Web Assets! Han cambiado el Hero, vale, ok. El Hero se supone que es... Vamos a ver. Vamos a ver. Ciérrame sesión ahí en la web. Vale, no lo veo ahora mismo. Vamos a ver. Vale, ya se han tenido que lanzar algo. Ya han pasado minuticos, de hecho. A ver si hacen algún anuncio, tío. Falta que lo tienen que lanzar ahora, tío, la actualización. Está a puntísimo, ¿eh? De hecho, sale como verificado ya de la deck. No. Ah, sí, mira. Sale como verificado ya en la tienda, que esto no estaba. ¿Tienes alguna rama nueva? No. Vale. Venga, que esto arranca, gente. Ah, este es el nuevo asset. Hostia, que se puede ver desde SteamDB. ¡Buah, Super HD, tío! Nuevo logo, gente. Tenemos nuevo logo. Bueno, nada mal. No sabía que se podía ver directamente desde aquí. Ok. Han puesto este tipo de logo. Muchas gracias, Aramis. Este logo es el que sale en el menú de la deck. O sea, por eso lo han cambiado precisamente. Venga, dame algo más, Valve. Steam Legacy, tío. Ojo, mira esto, el nombre. Descripción. Pre-25 aniversario. ¡Oh! Hemos acertado con el nombre, gente. Mira, mira, no me había fijado en esto. Descripción. Build pre-25 aniversario, gente. Vamos a tener versión de aniversario. Confirmadísimo. Confirmadísimo, gente. Tenemos versión 25 aniversario. No estoy leyendo el chat, Felipe. Dios mío, chaval. Buah, chaval. Ah, tenemos los tamaños. Tenemos los ¡hola, chaval! 400 megas el tamaño de este paquete. ¿Qué tiene que ocupa tanto? El base Gold Source. Si alguien se hace un sumatorio de esto, podemos ver qué tamaño tiene. Va a tener el tal, porque esto 50 500 600 650 7 8 una giga, tío. Giga y media. Giga y media, tío. Ese es el... Hostia, pues aquí han mejorado en giga y medio, tío. 75, 45. Voy a ver una cosa. Voy a ver cuáles son los tamaños de archivos locales. Porque si yo me vengo aquí y hago esto, puedo ver el tamaño, por ejemplo, de los idiomas. Vale, el tamaño del idioma no ha cambiado. Ha cambiado los del juego base. O sea, y el juego base tiene...
Pónganle forro porque se viene.
Pues toda esta sitio. ¿Podemos ordenar por tamaño? Sí. 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 Pues eso, mapa, todo el juego base. Todo el juego base. Ok, y luego ya, pues, claro. Todo esto son... Claro, que todo esto no suma a la vez porque son los idiomas. ¡No! ¡Lo he hecho público ya! No me asustes, ¿eh? No, esto es lo de antes. Vale. Vale. Esto no lo están cambiando. Dame algún vídeo o algo, tío. Dame algo, tío. Tío, estamos viendo en directo, ¿eh? Lo estamos viendo en directo, gente. No, aún no ha lanzado nada. Y en Valve, aquí en YouTube, nada tampoco. Lo han pasado a público, tío. Pero esto porque no se me actualiza. Voy a verificar archivos. No debería... ¡Ay, que no lo veis! ¿Por qué no lo estáis viendo? ¿Qué cojones está pasando con esto, tío? ¿Qué está pasando con...? Un segundo, gente. Porque se me ha quedado una puta pantalla delante. Ah, porque soy gilipollas, vale. Vale, perdón, gente, no lo estabais viendo bien. Estaba pues la... Sí, lo sé. Por cierto, gente, si veis algo de Nopor, pues que sepáis que es normal, ¿vale? Tengo el PC lleno de Nopor. O sea, te quiero decir. No os asustéis. ¡Se está actualizando! ¡Se está actualizando! ¡Se está actualizando Half-Life!
Fíjate en las betas de Half-Life en Steam.
¡Que te calles! A ver, corta la música. ¿Qué mierda qué es esta shit, colega? Vamos a ver, tira para adelante. Dame algo jugoso, por favor. ¡Eh! ¡El vídeo antiguo! No lo estáis viendo. Un segundo, gente. Un segundo. Vale, a ver. Carga, por favor. ¡Oh! ¡Oh my god! Vale. Cárgalo, por favor, puto Steam, porque no lo ves. Ahí, mira. Versión 25 aniversario, gente. Versión 25 aniversario. No se oye. Esta mierda, tío. OpenGL software, ¿vale? ¿Qué es esto? Han actualizado la interfaz. Contenido, bloquear contenido. Esta mierda está aquí. ¿Qué shit es esto, tío? Buscar servidores, crear servidor. Nueva acá. Sala de entrenamiento. Plan Half-Life. Han metido la demo, tío. Sala de entrenamiento.
Bienvenido a la pista de entrenamiento de Black Mesa, donde aprenderás...
¿Qué cambios tendrá, tío?
Yo soy tu ayudante holográfico. Hola, bienvenido a la pista de entrenamiento de Black Mesa, donde aprenderás...
La interfaz, gente. Porque como suelo grabar cosas... Y dame el crosshair también. Tío, ¿qué está pasando? ¿Y esta interfaz gigante? ¿The fuck? Es gigante, tío.
Púlsalo y apareceré.
No han metido el disparo secundario, que era una de las cosas que quería ver. Tío, pero... Vamos a ver. ¿Puedo capturar un monitor entero en vez de... En vez del juego? Un segundo, gente. Es que quiero estar... Vale. Si yo hago esto... Vale, lo veis todo. Vale, es que quiero estar viendo... Entre lo que están sacando y el juego. Dame algo nuevo, tío. Dame un aviso, dame un vídeo, dame algo, Valve. ¡Anúnciamelo! ¡Anúnciamelo de alguna forma, Valve, esto! ¿Y en la tienda? No tenemos nada en la tienda. Si busco Half-Life, ¿hay alguna versión nueva que no hayamos visto? No, no hay ningún Half-Life nuevo. Han metido el uplink, tío. Lo que voy a hacer una cosa. Como tengo 1.000.000 de mods, voy a venir aquí y para que no se joda nada, ver archivos locales. Aquí tengo la carpetita. Voy a desinstalarlo y lo voy a instalar de nuevo. Voy a eliminar la carpeta Half-Life y que lo instale de cero. Porque quiero verlo tal cual, tío. Sin ningún mod. Es que tengo cambios de texturas y tengo varias mierda aquí dentro. Entonces prefiero instalarlo de nuevo en un segundo. Que salga la carpeta de nuevo y ya está. Mientras tanto vamos viendo. O sea que... Vamos a ver. Tenemos la interfaz One, tío. ¿Cómo era el comando que le metías al Half-Life 2 y se te abría la interfaz de la deck? ¿Cómo era? Game Padui o algo así. Vamos a ver, mientras se instala lo voy a buscar un momento. Sí, Game Padui era, vale. Ok. Vale. Si yo al Half-Life normal le meto comando guión Game Padui, me va a abrir el menú de la deck. Y lo más... Esto es lo que hay, vale. Este es el vídeo que han rescatado, tío. Voy a conectar un mando. Igual lo tenía que haber conectado antes de abrir el juego. No parece que tengamos nuevo. De todas formas voy a meter el mando. A ver qué pasa. Listo. Y voy a abrir de nuevo por si acaso. Tenemos versión One, tío, pero lo que no tenemos es celebración alguna por el momento. O sea, te han metido esto, pero es que ni la han anunciado ni han hecho nada, tío. Vamos a ver. No parece que funcione el mando, ¿eh? No puedo soltar la sheet esta, el ratón, apártate. Ya no veo aquí... ¡Quieto! ¡Valve! ¡Esto no funciona! Vamos a nueva partida. Dame a Blink, tío. Es curioso. Madre mía, ya empezamos con los fallos de Scolcer Discord. ¿Qué pasa? Voy, ¿qué pasa? Que han anunciado algo, ¿no? Y no lo he visto. Un segundo, gente. Half-Life 25 aniversario documental. ¡Chaval! Hostia, esto hay que verlo, ¿eh? Un documental, tío. Espera. Quiero ver un poco. No van los idiomas, tío. No me lo puedo creer, se lo han cargado. ¿Se han cargado los idiomas? ¿Me estás diciendo que se han cargado los idiomas? Nueva partida. Me estás diciendo que se han cargado los idiomas. Nuevo logo. Ah, no. El del uplink, a lo mejor.
Este tren automático se ofrece como servicio de cortesía y seguridad a los empleados de los laboratorios Black Mesa. Son las 8:47.
Se ve que el texto es diferente, tío.
De 34 grados, con una máxima prevista de 40 grados. La temperatura de la...
Lista de mapas. Quiero testear un poco, a ver si... Mira, Steam, sí, lo sé.
Hola, Gordon. Tenía unos cuantos mensajes para ti.
Yo me esperaba subtítulos o algo así, tío. El documental es de 1 hora, vamos a verlo, tío. Lo vemos aquí en directo, o sea, así de claro te lo digo. Vamos a ver si pasa algo cuando pillas el traje. Pillamos el traje y ya está, y vamos a ver el documental, gente.
Hola.
Vale, todo esto sigue igual, han respetado...
¿Por qué tenemos que llevar estas corbatas tan ridículas?
Sí, los nombres son los mismos.
Bienvenido al sistema de detección.
Tío, la interfaz es gigante. O sea... No sé si han metido brillo, gama, texture filtering... ¿Puedo quitar el filtro de texturas y que se vea todo cuadriculado?
Acordarme de informar sobre
¡Sí,
esa
tío!
situación.
¡Mírate! Todo pixelado, tío. Dios, qué recuerdos. Ejecutar en ventana, PNGL. Allow with screen film view. Ni puta idea. Ratón. Ok. Voces tal. Tal. Ok. Bueno, pues nada. Pues ya hemos visto la versión esta. Vamos a ver si han cambiado algo en la tienda, tío. Así que documental de 1 hora. Me encanta, ¿eh? ¿Habrá tenido que ver algo el Doritos? Con el documental, tío, que siempre está... Siempre está por ahí. Sí que tenemos documental de 1 hora, ¿eh? ¿En qué puto canal está, tío? Que nos sale aquí... En Valve... ¡Ah, es que está oculto! ¡Es un vídeo oculto! Ok. Gente, ir a pillar palomitas o algo porque se mira aquí el asunto, ¿eh? Vamos a estar ahí 1 hora viendo esto. Esta shit. Scolcer revisa Steam. Han metido ya, ¿verdad? Algo. Revisa Steam. ¿El qué exactamente de Steam? Aquí no hay nada, tío. No sé. Así me voy a hacer yo más pequeñito o algo. Me voy a apartar aquí. A ver, me voy a hacer pequeñito. Y me voy a poner aquí arriba. Listo. ¿No me has dicho... Valve, ¿no me has dicho algo? Por aquí, no me has anunciado nada, hijo de puta. No me... ¿De dónde cojones habéis sacado eso, tío? Porque yo no... Porque yo no veo en ningún sitio el documental, macho. Údate de Half-Life 2. No, lo del canal actualizado Half-Life 2 y tal, y los episodios ha sido corrección de errores. Ya lo he estado viendo. Bueno, gente. Silencio, que se viene cine aquí. ¡Dios! Parece el fondo de Black Mesa, tío. ¡Madre mía, loco! Dime que está traducido en varios idiomas. En inglés... Vamos a ponerlo en español. Aunque sea traducción automáticamente. Como hay traducción hecha, pues la traducción será medio decentilla, espero. Estas son las fotos que se filtraron, el pack de fotos que se filtró hace tiempo, de donde habían sacado las texturas para el juego. Por cierto, capítulos se llaman Early Days of Val, tecnología en secuencias, diseño de caracteres, bueno, personajes. Vamos a darle aquí cañita, narrativa y voice acting. Madre mía, Sen por release. Hostia, Tito Gay aquí al final, tío. Madre mía, vamos a tener un mensajito de Tito Gay al final. Venga.
Eastern Washington. I did a drive out to the Columbia Gorge and took a lot of photos and also a lot of just reference imagery of just like, hey, this is what desert looks like and big cliffs and stuff like that. That drive was 2 days. It was 8 hours down, 8 hours back, and I'm not even sure I spent the night. I did. I must have spent the night down there. So while it was definitely made for the Southwest, the local...
Tienes el pelo plano. Pareces G-Man.
Good morning and welcome to the Black Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel.
Hablarán de Próspero y mierdas así, tío. Las texturas están remasterizadas, puede ser. Espera, ¿han reunido? ¿Estará la Ilau, tío? Voy a hacerme un poco más grande, que me siento súper pequeñito. Al fin y al cabo es un vídeo reacción. Hostia, han reunido a toda la gente, tío, original. Hostia, estará Bailey, tío, que estaba desaparecido de la industria.
My name is Mike Harrington. I was co-founder of Valve. I wasn't really used to big companies. When I started at Microsoft, it wasn't that big. It was like
el tío que fundó Valve junto con Gabe Newell y posiblemente tomó la peor decisión de la historia, que es irse de Valve.
That was still like 1996. So
abandonar el dinero infinito que luego vendría.
Like a year before, like I'm leaving in a year, and I'm going to start a game company. And the first person I talked to was a good friend of mine, Michael Abrash. But at that time, he was trying to do something within Microsoft, and by the time it made sense, John Carmack had convinced him to go work at id. So how could he say no to that? And then I was having lunch with Gabe, and I said, Gabe, I'm leaving. I'm just going to leave, and I'm going to start a game company. He goes, I want to leave. I want to start a game company. Like, all right, and that was it.
On the surface, we should have failed. And realistically, both Mike and I thought we would get about a year into it, realize we'd made horrible mistakes, and go back to our friends at Microsoft and ask for our jobs back.
Está delgadillo ya, Se ha puesto...
software development, that there were
ha empezado a comer ensaladitas.
That goes into it. I think we also had some pretty clear ideas of how to design a company, right? So when we were building Half-Life, we were also designing Valve at the same time.
We had no plan except for, by then, like I mentioned, Michael had gone to id. And he said, oh, you're starting a game company, you have to use our engine. So Gabe and I flew down to Mesquite to meet id. We spent a good deal of time with John Romero, and he told us, like, this is what you need to do to start a game company. You need to go out and hire some level designers and do that kind of thing. And we kind of understood the engineering part. And then because we were Michael's friends, we walked away with the source code to Quake that day. We had no contract yet. We had kind of an idea of what it could be, and they just gave us a CD, and we had kind of the crown jewels of id, and that,
Esto más o menos ya se sabía. Hostia, mira, Chu Jones por ahí.
I think most of us had no game development experience.
Eran todos unos críos, tío.
in our homes
Buah,
at night
chaval.
for fun, or some people were from the software world, but they had never worked on a game. I think we had 3 or 4 people in the entire company who had actually shipped a game when we started Half-Life. We have to figure out what is Valve's first game. So we have to come up with an IP. So everything is done from scratch.
Gabe came into the office and he said, I read this story. I read this Stephen King story called The Mist.
The Mist.
You know, Stephen King, it's got monsters, you know, people in a grocery store, fog comes in, monsters in the fog, you know, use your imagination. We didn't want to write that as a game. That wasn't really the point, but it was just the tension and, you know, how it felt.
Well, it was interesting. At first, we had 2 games. Greg was working
Hostia,
on
qué bien,
Especial,
chaval.
and then Half-Life was.
Oh, si están todos en la tumba ya, tío. Goomer, tío. Buah. Dios. Estará Laislao, tío, que se fue enfadado de Val, tío.
Every time the engine got a feature for Prospero, Half-Life stole it. And then Half-Life just started getting visually, you know, more impressive and cooler. And eventually it just, because it was going to ship sooner, it just stole the resources.
Oh, mira.
And Prospero just faded away.
This character had like a floating orb, and it wanted to have some, you know, effects on it. It's kind of magical energy, something. And so I worked with them on that and came up with the first version of the beam effects, and you know, they were using it.
Es posible que tengamos estos diseños ahora en buena calidad gracias a este vídeo.
What is that? How did you do that? So very quickly that got into Half-Life. The disaster sequence has kind of beam effects all over it, and we ended up using it for the Vortigons.
Gritos de
There were a
tío.
bunch of things that we were doing that we thought would help us tackle the problem of what video games were. And what video games were a rapidly changing field where, at the time, 90% of video games failed to turn a profit. And a few percentage of them were very, very profitable, right? So it was a field that really valued talent.
You know, like I said, Gabe and I brought some people, and then, you know, from there on out, we had to hire people. And, you know, Romero said you got to hire level designers. So, you know, we found some people who.
O sea que Romero estuvo ayudando por detrás a cimentar las bases de cómo hacer un videojuego, tío.
I was sitting in my office one day and my phone rang just out of the blue, and I pick it up and it's this recruiter. Eventually, he hooked me up with Gabe, and they flew me up here. It's a big surprise.
But then we started looking. You know, the nice thing that we had is we had a whole bunch of people in the world who had been working on mods, and so we could start looking at those folks. And that's where we hired a lot of our designers.
Steve and Guthrie, Steve Bond, John Guthrie were my
Qué
favorite
tío.
so far.
Other
Dios,
than
es
Doug,
que son unos... Dios.
Gabe sent them an email and they're
Se
like,
están en la tumba
"Who's
ya,
this
tío."
scammer?" You know, never heard of these guys. Just kids, like barely 20, I swear. And they show up and they're just the most creative, brilliant, clever. Fucking clever. Steve had the magic ability.
Es Próspero. Próspero era el primer juego que estaban desarrollando. ¡Oh! ¡Lo he traído!
On some game for some company, I think that was the start for a lot of people to something cool.
Aquí había dos equipos. Estaba el equipo de Half-Life y el equipo de Próspero. Y es lo que han dicho antes. Al final, los recursos que se necesitaban para Half-Life fue absorbiendo el juego de Próspero y se pasó todo a Half-Life.
Already doing stuff that was cool.
And then Mark
Lo han traído de
Mark
vuelta,
actually
tío.
knows how stories work, you know, beginning, middle, end, and all this stuff. And he had all sorts of great ideas, and he would also would just, you know, bring good ideas out of everybody else as well.
Like the person who wrote more code on Half-Life was a chemistry major who decided to be an IP lawyer in Atlanta, right? And he ended up writing more code than anybody else. Or the creature designer for most of the AI for the creatures in the game was a manager at a Waffle House. It's not like there are a bunch of people that you could say, oh, this person, you know, has a PhD in video game design. It was that combination of both finding those people when it wasn't necessarily easy to find them at that stage in the video game industry, and then also convincing them that it was a better place to work than anybody else.
El Quiver, sí. Estuviera modificando el motor del Quake. Capítulo 2. La actividad. Mira, tío. Esto estaba en el alfa, tío.
One of the things that I definitely learned was how to hire engineers. And we needed some engineers.
For us anyway, we had licensed ID's engine, we're using the Quake engine, and one of the things me and some of the other engineers probably were talking about
Acero 52.
was if it would be possible to use the save system to kind of like join our levels together in a really seamless way, so you get to the end of a level, save stuff, and then load some of it on the next level. And have it just feel like, the world.
Seguro que no te enseñan las fotos de las tías buenas.
Like, every once in a while, a hallway or the train would get to a point and you would have a little stop for the level to transition. And so he wrote that code leveraged on top of just the save load code to do the transitions. And I think in Half-Life 1 we got most of the transitions were a second or two.
I remember when we went from 8-bit to 16-bit, like, hey, we don't have to have all our textures fit in a certain, 256 colors.
La revolución, tío. Que fue pasar de 8 bits a 16.
The two tech investments we made for Half-Life was to get to 16-bit color and skeletal animation for all the monsters.
But at the time it was
Dios, la calidad es impresionante, de lo que están mostrando, tío.
It's like a text file of vertex positions over time.
I wanted so much more animation, and I wanted the animators to have the freedom to put in 100, 200, 500 frame of animation, if not more. And then you can do all sorts of other things because you have a skeleton, so it's like,
no sé si os estáis dando cuenta,
I can start
pero están mostrando el alfa
and replay the same animation or reuse most of the
en
same models.
1080.
We can swap out heads, we can swap out this, we can swap out whatever.
Like, all the technology that went into the game to make it as fun as it is was not available one generation before. So licensing the Quake engine, which was, very mature and had level design.
Añadir un nuevo mapa multijugador. Luego veremos mejor la versión que nos han puesto en Steam.
Like, my old Doom levels have a lot of weird, odd events in them. I think I asked Ken, is it possible that I could, have access to the character's animation, like a trigger? Like what I mentioned, I could make the guys go into an animation, I could make them run, and then I would configure everything. It was all hack. This is
alto respeto a las papadas,
and that is mostly what I built. It was like things like characters reacting and jumping out are made to look like, or I'd use a push brush to make it look like it launched at something.
A loud sound happened.
El alfa a 1080, tío.
Gabe's dictate was, as you walked forward, something needs to happen like every 3 to 5 seconds. The player stands still, the
didn't have to be much.
Universe can be quiet. But if they move forward, if they're active, the universe needs to play back something, needs to do something, even if it is a scripted sequence or
even just an interesting sign
or a sound or
podrían liberar esta versión, la verdad.
So I came up with this interaction method where you could do little AIs where the characters would talk and interact with you a little bit. And then we wanted to do spectacle, and that was scripted sequences where you could tell a character, you need to run here and then jump into this animation, and then have a bunch of you all synchronize your animation because it's somebody flying through the air, they're smashing something, or they're doing something like that.
Yeah, and then test it and figure out, like, oh, this is real easy to break. That was the roughest thing about scripted sequences, where you'd have like a head crab jumping on a scientist or something, and it's like, yeah, it works totally fine 90% of the time, but some people just sprint right at the scientist, and sometimes we had to put them behind glass.
Sometimes getting the level designers making the player want to do the thing.
Esta es la versión que tenemos ahora en Steam, ¿o qué? Lo digo porque la interfaz es gigante.
The tentacle sequence is probably the one I remember the most.
You're playing it, right? That was the first time I think they melded together.
Because you had your trigger
so closely,
and we wanted it to be triggered. So by the time you start to see it, you see the scientist flying through the air and hitting the wall. Then you could look in and you could see the scientist being carried away. The tentacle itself is separate; it's on its own, and you bring the two together, mesh them together, and boom.
It felt so seamless.
Pues igual había que haberlo juntado mejor,
Moments like that, and that might have been the first one, is when you start to see the scripted events and play start to blend a little bit more than just ambience.
For God's sake, open the silo door! They're coming for us! It's our only way out! Oh my God, we're doomed!
Tenemos las notas del parche.
I remember Brett in particular had done some of the
Tenemos las notas del parche del Half-Life. Luego las veremos cuando terminemos con esto.
And it gave them a little bit of life. A ton of the work that went into that area was because we knew it was going to be the beginning of the game, and we really needed to make it a vibrant and interesting, fun place to be and explore.
So originally they were designed to sort of be behind glass. They were just designed to be spectacle.
Yeah, a little vignette.
And then all of the level designers like, no, I'm gonna put that right in front of you. And I'm like, oh God, how am I supposed to make this work? It's not supposed to do it.
Get away from there, Freeman. I'm expecting an important message.
The run speed for the player was so insane.
Yeah.
It was like, what, 25 miles an hour or something?
It was sprinting, it was...
You could get so far, so fast. And so you'd either have to make the scripted sequence like so quick that you could barely see what's happening.
Freeman era tan rápido moviéndose que tenían que hacer que todo fuera a mucha velocidad. Que todas las escenas fueran muy rápidas.
And then you wanted them to see what was happening. But when we play tested, and if like a scientist was like being pulled into a vent or something, like people wouldn't just stop and like, oh, sometimes they would be like, oh wow, look at that. They just run straight ahead and just start shooting.
It's hard when you think back to it to recognize that those kind of interactive moments were so new. Like people just hadn't seen them.
It was worth it because no other games were doing that. No other games had that interactivity. No other games had that spectacle playing out in front of you. And it just added that whole feel of Half-Life. Gabe had started to develop this theory around interactivity, and the environment needed to let you do what you wanted and then react to it. So if you did something, if you shot your gun, there needed to be a bullet hole in the wall. If you did
claro, que todo esto que están hablando es que era nuevo. Es que todo esto no existía antes. La interactividad con el mundo, ¿cómo se dice en español? El responsiveness.
And you'd have these conversations where you'd be sitting in a design review and somebody'd say, that's not realistic. And you're like, okay, what does that have to, like, explain to me why that's interesting, because in the real world, I have to write up lists of stuff I have to go to the grocery store to buy. And I've never thought to myself that realism is fun. I go play games to have fun. And so we had to come up with some notion of what fun was. We knew it was an ad hoc definition, and it was the degrees to which the game recognizes and responded to the player's choices and actions, right? You know, in behavioral science, you would say we're explicitly talking about what were reinforcers and what the reinforcement schedules were, right? At that point in time, that was a useful way of making design decisions. The point I would make is, if I go up to a wall and shoot it, to me, it feels like the wall is ignoring me. I'm getting a narcissistic injury when the world is ignoring me. So does this, like, to me, I was trying to convey to the user a sense of, yes, you were making choices, yes, you were progressing, which meant the game had to acknowledge that back to you. If you shoot at a wall, there have to be decals. If you kill a bunch of Marines, the Marines have to run away from you, right? You have to have this sense of the game acknowledging and responding to the choices and actions and progressions that you've made. Otherwise, it loses any sort of impact.
Tranquilidad, gente, luego vamos a ver las notas del parche, vamos a ver bien lo que han metido, ¿vale? No os preocupéis. No os preocupéis que lo vamos a ver todo.
We were on the same page in terms of what the game should look like, which would be just sort of
poco a poco
in a very naturalistic kind of way. Like these are creatures from another dimension, another planet that look like they evolved in a way, and Chuck had he came from Duke Nukem. He made a bunch of monsters that went in a sort of a different direction, and for a while the game had a hard time coalescing around a single vision.
All the ones that looked like genitals were Ted's. And all the ones with shiny bits that looked like alien soldiers were Chuck's.
That was a thing when I first came in, Ted's style and mine.
And trying to figure that out.
Trying to find the harmony between the two to make it work.
Yeah.
Ted he really liked the Wayne Barrow aesthetic, and I had a little bit different, but it worked. Ted made these really weird. He did the head.
El concepto original de mira esto, chaval.
Weird. He did the.
Mira esto. Era como que el headcrab se te ponía en la cabeza y como que te empezaba a comerte medio cuerpo. Y entonces te controlaba así. ¿Habéis visto esta shit, colega? Hostia, tú.
the head crab. You know, that's pretty much the symbol of it all. And I remember taking his head crab and putting it on a scientist and making the zombie. Right. Well, we pretty much we talked, and it's like, okay, you do that, and Ted did the soldiers, I did the scientists. I did a lot of the aliens, and with the Hornet gun, I did the Hornet gun.
Hostia puta, tenemos muchas imágenes nuevas,
Alien slave. Well, I did some animations for the bull squid, or bull chicken, I have to call him that. But that's a Ted creature there. The hound eye was Ted's as well.
Yeah, a lot of the fleshy. If it's got a lot of flesh on it, maybe too much.
Yeah, that's a Tedism.
You can always tell Ted's designs.
Un tedismo, que los monstruos tuvieran mucha carne.
Aquarium or, you know, like unspeakable.
Big Mama.
You know?
Oh, Big Mama! I forgot about Big Mama. Oh God!
It's like, you know, it's a testicle, right? It's like
so disturbed.
I concepted a guy in sort of a NASA spacesuit, a scientist guy. He was actually modeled after a couple of programmers I know. Big, beefy, bearded Linux programmers, you know. And so that's where the HEV suit sort of emerged out of. There was a lot of desire for not having a space marine or a soldier be the guy. And then Chuck Jones went off and did a pretty different version of him that became known as Ivan the Space Biker.
Oh God. I remember telling myself, it's like anytime you make a screenshot, make sure it's good, because you don't know where this is going to appear again.
We didn't know that.
And Ivan is the prime example of that one. Sure, so, you know, you're looking at, well, go look at Quake. It's like, okay, I'm looking at that.
Se viene Iván, gente.
Boxy head. And you're always hearing, don't put too many polys in it. It's like, okay, so Ivan got the square head. And it was kind of an early, just a rough prototype of a Gordon Freeman baby. And I remember we didn't know what Gordon looked like. So it's like I was looking for somebody, and I found Mike Harrington. It's like, Mike, what does Gordon look like? I don't know. Put yourself in there. Oh, okay. And so I went in and put kind of my likeness on the early Gordon model in the game. And it kind of stayed
Did
there.
Did you have a ponytail?
Well, I was an ex-tattoo artist, so yeah, I definitely had that. I don't have anything to work with now, but yeah, that point I had a ponytail on.
If you play the game, you know that it's Chuck. If you play multiplayer and you see the model, it's clear.
But yeah, if you look on the back of that, there's this little four triangles, and he's got a little ponytail back there. I did the G-Man, and again, that one was Gabe was talking about the cigarette man. So we needed our own equivalent.
Because after a while, after playing with the game for a long time, people realized, like, hey, we made this character, and just in this one office scene in the beginning, you know, where he's behind the window and he's talking to a scientist or something, and he's like, he looks really creepy. It was late in the day that we thought, oh, okay, well, he's going to be the big bad behind all of this. Like, scatter him around in places that you can't get to him, but he's there mysteriously.
There wasn't enough in the beginning of the game. It's like, we need another monster. Head crabs weren't enough. It got kind of repetitious. I think I grabbed Ted and said, I need them to do this and this. And so he whipped it out in not much time at all. I'm gonna get the timing just right, and I have no time to do this.
O sea, que salieron así de la nada los Vertigons.
And then once it was working, everybody said, "Oh, just go back and sprinkle them back in the maps." And that was this.
Because we introduced them a little earlier than we were planning.
Yeah, because they weren't real tough. They weren't supposed to be tough.
But they were ranged.
But they were ranged, and they were fun, and they had a big show, and like that was showing off a bunch of stuff.
Oh, tetonas.
I remember the assassin came in pretty late.
That was it. It was like, okay, I have a week and a half. It was already done, it was already all modeled, already all animated, and the requirement was it couldn't have any new animations and any new anything. So had to come up, I grabbed a bunch of Steve Bond's AI and banged that thing out. I built a level super crude, but it had all the right spacing and all the right heights and all the right.
Es súper interesante todo esto que están diciendo, tío.
Again, it's just a presentation where this creature gets to shine, this enemy gets to shine, and is your entire focus for that scene. And it's kind of a memorable experience because it's it just takes place in a different fashion than other encounters, you know, and you get knocked out, and there's all kinds of, like, the lights go out, and you get dragged through a corridor and things. So, again, it's something you remember in the game. We just did a lot of playtesting and did a lot of level building and used all of the monsters and used everything that we had developed and started seeing which ones kind of stuck out a little oddly. You know, like we had the hound eyes that Ted had concepted and Kelly had done great sounds for them.
Estos perricos están más en HD que los que estaban en la beta, ¿verdad?
Sort of alien
en el 052.
And Chuck did what we called
the Panther,
which was this big Black Panther-looking creature that also just had a big red eye for his face and a big shark fin coming out the back. And design-wise, he seemed like this is a very useful creature. You know, it's like when you design things, you know, you like to have a gradient of difficulty, a gradient of escalation and threat. And so if we had these hound eyes, then
se ve tan bien, se ve tan bien el alfa.
Scarier looking thing would be more.
Hay veces que lo sacan cuadrado y hay veces que lo sacan en 1080.
And then sort of just worked its way out because folks couldn't find a way to incorporate.
Lo quitaron del juego, la del Fanterae, porque no supieron cómo meterlo, cómo presentarlo y cómo tal. Les toca
It was something that I did, just another creature from the air. We had the chub toad that we were going to use as a feeding animal to help, and they had a mechanic to where they were going to use this to distract monsters so you could possibly get by. And it pretty much reached fruition to where we created the object, but then again, time became the factor and it had to get cut.
No tuvieron tiempo. Qué pena, tío. Hubiera sido muy diferente el juego si hubieran tenido medio año más.
DC, and so there's all these like big, really banal office buildings, and that's kind of the direction I went. So it started becoming a facility. And so I started making these kind of linoleum tiles and the drop ceiling, the concrete block wall, the black and white tile floor.
She was like the texture artist for for most of the
tío.
It's just an overwhelming amount of work.
Originally, I was hand painting all of the textures, and you can really see a shift in some of them where they go from hand painted to photo reference. The photo references are much, much better. So I was all over Seattle, Harbor Island, Gasworks Park, getting rusty metal things. What can I get good pictures of that is vaguely industrial and interesting to look at? And then how can we use this? And so, sides of boxcars, and I don't know how many hallways in Half-Life are inside a train car kind of thing. The Kirkland Costco, a lot of time in the Kirkland Costco, getting just packages of, I don't know why I needed snacks or something.
The first year was all about.
Tengo una saga del 97, pero todavía no era suficientemente divertido.
We were finding our.
Escucha, gente, yo no digo nada, pero esto se ve demasiado HD y hay sombras en esta versión del 25 del alfa. ¿Qué cojones es esto, Valve? Tío, que las texturas están en HD, ¿qué me estás contando? Fíjate en el fondo. ¿Qué es todo esto? A ver. Te aviso, rehicieron la alfa. Me estoy mareando. Dios santo, colega.
And it wasn't quite as focused. We were finding our footing.
We were getting into the 3 months before supposedly shipping in '97, and it's like, this isn't gelling. This is really not good. This is like, quick knockoff, cash grab, stupid. And let's not do that. There was a lot of disconnect between what all of the different groups were doing, what engineering was doing and
Tío,
what
el
level design
palangazo
was doing,
antiguo,
and
tío.
animation was doing. We had a bunch of monsters that had no plans to get in the game because nobody else was assigned to work on them, and we had a bunch of levels that like, what's supposed to go in here? Oh, I don't know, everybody's gonna do a bunch of stuff, and like, no, that doesn't work that way.
So here we were, all these people doing all these cool things, and just everything's just this random collection of, oh, here's a cool moment and a cool this, and you know, and then it's gone, and you know, oh, now on to the next thing. Because the way we were building the game was every level designer was kind of his own silo, his own universe. And I think that just grew out of our, you know, kind of mod developer roots, but it wasn't cohesive, and it certainly didn't have a, you know, a strategy for like maximizing any of that stuff.
You must have been in the meeting when we reviewed all the levels. It was like the first time everybody piled into a room,
right?
And Gabe had his crazy Hellraiser chair with the beautiful Mac monitor, and we played for 2 days. He played everyone's levels. But I remember one moment he turned around. He was like this with his hair. He's going, "We're gonna fail. We're gonna fail. We're gonna fail. We're gonna fail. We're gonna fail." And I was just like, it blew me away. I was like, "Oh shit, this isn't good."
You know, we were doing our best trying to make this game and the story, and you know, we had a schedule from Sierra, and it was a tight schedule. And we told them like, we're not going to ship this, and we realized that you're not going to pay us to continue developing this, but we're going to do it anyway.
Late is just for a little while, suck is forever, right? We could try to force this thing out the door, but that's not the company we want to be. That's not the people we want to be. That's not the relationship we want to have with our customers.
And so we kind of, Kelly and I kind of sat down and sort of tried to take an inventory of all the cool stuff we had built, and why weren't we just, you know, building more on top of that. And you know, those discussions kind of led to us building this kind of design cabal process to try to give some cohesion to the game and kind of changing the way we were approaching it.
And so a cabal was a small group of people, multidisciplinary group. You know, there's like an artists, you know, level designers, engineers, and you know, everything in that. And a small team that would write up a spec for a, you know, level. You know, there was the arc that, you know, Mark had written, so we knew how that fit into the story.
And we got a small group of people together, and we started with the beginning, and we went through literally what map do we need to build to tell us the story we're going to have to tell, and then what does that connect to, and what's the next piece and the next piece.
The strongest and most influential thing that came out of them was, to me, the sketches, and they were really the visual meeting notes, right?
We came up with a formula for how that worked. We had a certain percentage of the time where you were fighting, a certain percentage of the time where you're exploring, a certain percentage of the time where you're solving puzzles. And so we could apply that uniformly through the game, and that worked pretty well.
Capítulo 4. Resonancia.
Good morning.
Ahora te van a hablar de la historia, ¿no? Supongo.
Mesa Transit System. This automated train is provided for the security and convenience of the Black Mesa Research Facility personnel.
The whole opening of the game was specifically a reaction to how all the other first-person shooters were, whether they had cutscenes or not. Like sometimes, like they would just open without a cutscene, but you know, you're standing in a room with a gun and there's a thing attacking you. So we could look at examples of all that, and I think there was expectation that that's what Half-Life had to do because every other game was doing it.
I can tell you the number of people who started up the game, were staring at it, and then accidentally bumped their mouse and realized this is live.
Yeah.
And as simple as that sounds, it was mind-blowing for so many people because there was too much going on. This isn't real time, this is a recording, you know.
That was sort of the way we, you know, stumbled through.
Ya es que imagínate, pasar de tío de Quake a esto. Es la puta revolución.
Story, but nobody's doing this in first-person shooters.
You're this anonymous scientist and you're riding on this train into work and rolled the credits at the beginning. It was kind of like a cinematic experience almost. Like I don't think games had really gone down that road. It's so funny to look at it now because it's so primitive, but at the time it felt like you were really in this Black Mesa world.
Pre-disaster survived from the first year, so a lot of that geometry was from that first version of the game, but in a very minimal way, right? Just the basic style of some of the hallways, the curved corners in the hallways, things like that. They more became sort of like Lego pieces that John could use and stitch together and extrude. I know Brett did a lot of the raw geometry from pre-disaster, and then John did most of the work to ship it, and then the post and the train ride was all John, I think.
The Sector C, so those are heavily influenced by NASA control rooms, with my favorite green hammerite, really influenced a lot of like the starting. We started with the kind of the consoles. I'm trying to remember, and then there was just lots of hallways and people were getting lost, and I did the color stripes to help people follow them places.
One of the things that was actually super exciting was how
Tampoco es tan grande como para que se pierda la gente, no sé.
the lunchroom with the microwave, you press the button and it would go splat.
My God, what are you doing?
Yeah, all this work so you can start a microwave and blow up some soup, which was a reference to real life, because that happened regularly.
¡Qué nivel!
To real life.
Hostia, me acabo de dar cuenta, tío. Es que, hostia, está viejísimo, tío. Lo han encontrado, o sea, estaba... Supongo que esta gente lo tendrá en contacto, pero está desaparecido en la industria, ¿eh? Nadie sabe a qué se dedica, ni nadie sabe dónde está, ni qué está haciendo ahora mismo.
Because that happened regularly. Like, we regularly accidentally blew up...
Laidlaw mostly, wasn't it?
There were a few people who were just, you know, challenged with kitchen appliances.
Lo han desenterrado, pues básicamente.
You know, at one point
Poco le queda, tío, madre mía, qué lástima.
We had a lot of things going on in that kitchen.
All of that stuff had a real kind of eloquence that in the late 90s, in a world where everything was so over the top, you know, but we still got to go on flights of fancy.
Welcome to the HEV Mark IV.
I think like a super pivotal moment for me was when we came in this one morning and we saw the test chamber sequence that Kelly.
Esto lo ha comentado Gasari en los vídeos.
John Guthrie and Wedge was in that office, and
montaron la secuencia Kelly Bailey y Chuck Jones, creo que fue en una noche.
Cool stuff happened. But so Kelly and John stayed up all night
Kelly John,
and
vale.
did the test chamber sequence, and it's pretty much like the one we shipped.
I mean, that was a lot of what went on in that room that we called the submarine. It was just improvisation, you know, just what can we do to solve this
Está
problem?
muy amarillo, tío.
What's happening before to what's happening after. This needs to be somehow important, but we just don't know what to do. John and I talked about it. I went home that night and I sort of sketched out, like, you know, maybe we could do something cinematic. We'll take the camera away, we'll turn the lights off, we'll do sounds, we'll just throw everything we can at it. You know, we built that basically that day. You know, it was just a sort of a one-day throw it together. That's how fast we were moving.
They had audio, right? We had
Yeah,
the script.
yeah, it's like the heartbeat and the breathing, all that stuff was in there. And I played through it and it was like, damn, I have not seen this in any medium, in anything before, experienced something like this, where this immersive experience of this actually happening like this. And at that point, it's like, okay, I see what it is we're doing. And it's this kind of immersive, unbroken experience that happens to you, the player. And then that was this key principle about how, you know, we never take you out of that role.
Personally, the difference between before the disaster sequence and after the disaster sequence, I felt we really had, I had an understanding that this product was going to be special, or it was going to be possible, it was going to be tied together. Whereas before that, there was a lot of really good stuff and a lot of little things all disconnected. But you guys managed to tie two very different parts of the game together really well, and I thought, oh, okay, now I feel like we're on a track for finishing this product. To me, it shifted my brain to have a lot of confidence that this product's coming together rather than I'm just generating a lot of content that exists independently of other content.
One of the ways we were funding our development was we sold a preview copy of Half-Life to a video card company, I forget which one. And so they had in their contract that we had to deliver it to them by a certain date. And we got like the first 3 levels done for them. It was really a good milestone for us, just, you know, from working as a company, because hey, there was a deliverable. We got it done. And, you know, we shipped it off to them. And then I swear and I was just livid at first, which was stupid. But I was just like, I can't believe you guys let this get out. Like, you know, this wasn't us, you know. And then it turned into something amazing where people started playing it. And it was all over, and we started, you know, seeing it, you know, online, what people were thinking about it. And I forget which magazine who said, usually we don't review, you know, beta software, but they reviewed it and said, this is awesome. And that gave us a tremendous amount of confidence. You know, it was an outside validation of what we were trying to do, you know, that it was the right thing.
I think just with first-person shooters already, they were kind of like the vowels of weapons you put into first-person. You got to have a shotgun, and there's obviously
obviamente tiene que tener una
escopeta. Your weapon that's
100% de acuerdo.
Make you struggle and you drive you to get another weapon.
That was a lesson in how to make all of your weapons as orthogonal as possible, so each one did something completely different. All of the crazy weapons, those are my fault. So I did like the rocket launcher and the Gauss gun and the snarks.
Oh, I like snarks. Snarks always made me laugh. It was just always funny to watch people run away from the snarks.
The squeak grenade. It's called the snark, but I wanted something, a little creature that you could bring up and hold, and you could throw it out, and it would just start running. Because people were camping, and everybody.
Hostia, tú, esto es nuevo,
You wanted the anti-camp.
Mira esto, tío.
Because people were camping.
Mira esto, un bicho con un lacito.
And everybody hated campers at that point. So you wanted the anti-camp weapon. But it was kind of big.
Tío, tienen que hacer un mod que le pongan un lacito.
And just sit out there and just throw out 30 of them. And they're all over the map. I had a cat, and you'd sit there, you do your finger blue. Yeah, you do your finger towards him, and he'd get mad at you and he'd swat. So that was the inspiration for that particular animation. And then the other, that big alien creature with the, we needed some kind of alien weapon. Drew that one, built that one, animated that one, but that was also another one that whenever you could get in a corner and just shoot them in the air because the hornets would track. I think that was
mítico mapa de multijugador donde el agua sube.
Brainstorming these with your crew, making them, building them, putting them in the game, and then playing with them, and then they're fun.
So there's sort of a trope of having a melee weapon. I think it was Steve Bond and Ken Birdwell and I were saying we wanted a device where the world was reacting to you. It really goes back to that theory of fun. But we were just running around like idiots, smacking the wall. It's an odd thing to know in retrospect, but at the time it felt profoundly satisfying to be able to smack walls. And that was just an example of how that
La importancia de golpear las paredes.
What fun was. Ended up translating
Nadie lo había hecho.
Decisions that were really visceral. When you're going around whacking a wall, a crowbar is an obvious thing to whack the wall with.
Que todos los sonidos y la música fueron creadas por la misma persona. La misma persona que escribió el código de las reverberaciones. Y también ayuda a diseñar algunos niveles. Kelly Bailey, ¿no? Están hablando de él.
If the sound could let you know what's going to happen, that's really makes it powerful. So we're always on the lookout for that in level design, in monster design, communicating, because the AI is often hidden from...
Tío, no es normal ese color. Tiene hepatitis o algo así, es que está muy amarillo, ¿eh?
Internal state of the AI.
Parece enfermo, ¿eh? No, o sea, te lo digo de verdad.
They tell you, I'm injured, I'm going to throw a grenade, I'm taking cover. You know, they are broadcasting as constantly.
¿Tiene hepatitis o algo de
what's about to happen?
O algo de riñones?
So it's really important to try to keep those states distinct so that as you play the game, you're actually, whether you're aware of it or not, you're starting to be able to tell what's about to happen.
We knew he was a musician too, so he could do sounds, but you know, he also decided he was going to write the sound engine. And then he wrote the soundtrack. And he'd never written a soundtrack before, and he wrote the whole, soundtrack for the game, and it won an award, and it was crazy.
There just weren't that many of us. I had a little bit of a background playing music. I understood the sound engine really well, so it was really easy for me to just hook sounds in, and I understood enough about the level design side that I could kind of connect those things a little bit. The sounds could come from anywhere. And then I just heavily modified them. Usually those are animal sounds, reversing, changing the pitch, chopping them up and rearranging them. Head crabs were rats. The little squeaky, that's a rat slowed way, way down and then reversed.
Mira, nice.
Yeah, the DSP stuff was another cool thing that Kelly built. When you got an event, it sounded like you were an event, and that wasn't really happening, I guess, in at least in Quake and other games I was playing back then.
You know, we had these huge silos, these cavernous spaces. The day they had their own echoey DSP, it made an enormous difference, right? You believed the space.
El sonido es súper importante, tío.
Kelly tells me, oh God, Chuck Jones asked him if the characters could speak and have their mouths move. And Kelly said, you know, that's super easy. You know, I could just look at the audio and see if they're talking and do that. But like getting their mouth to move is stupid, he says to me. And I look, Chuck Jones told me the same thing. I told him making the mouths move was super trivially easy, but knowing when they're talking and knowing how to follow the envelope of the speech would be impossible. And Kelly and I just both looked at each other and like, oh. And so I went back to my office and he went back to his office. And I think within an hour, the characters were talking and their mouths were moving. And it was only because we sat there at lunch bitching about an animator who was 100% right.
Why are you leaving me here?
Scientist conversations, Kelly and I made that. When they're next to each other, one scientist will occasionally play a question and the other one will give him an answer. And it's not a script.
Hay 80.000 personas jugando en Half-Life 1. Ya hemos superado el remember de Freeman, ¿no? Que fueron 5.000.
I don't think so.
But it had a bunch of personality. It was really cool. And I worked on getting those guys to look at you and turn their heads.
When we first added the ability for scientists to respond to the player and other things in the environment, I would call them response rules. The first time that went in, they came flying down the elevator, and one of them looks at you and goes, "Oh, hello, Gordon." And then they explode into a pile of jibs at the bottom.
Luego cuando acabe esto comentamos todas las novedades que están saliendo ahora de fondo, ¿vale? Que estoy leyendo por el chat y tal, y me estáis enviando por Twitter y por Discord.
I hadn't really started working on the biggest part of the game, which I ended up shipping, which was surface tension, prior to then. A lot of the work that I had done was the Alien Research Labs, which turned into questionable ethics. And all of that was ditched. There were some concepts made it through, everything was rebuilt from zero. But you know what did make it through was Power Up. Yeah, basically that geometry survived completely intact. It was so closely designed for that creature that because the creature survived, the levels survived along with it. Yeah, there's this sort of central circular thing where you have to rotate the train and you have to kill the Gargantua first because he was always defending the way out. And then you have to go to like another area which looks very much like it was designed for Quake because pretty much it was.
O sea, esto estaba diseñado para Quake.
Drain the generator and then you could switch the power on and then you could take the train out. Yeah, I remember him being totally central to this whole thing. And then, well, how do we block the player? Which is, I mean, that's pretty much like design point number one for all level design. Okay, well, how do we prevent the player from just walking straight out through the exit? And you design backwards from there.
In the first year, we built a lot of world space, a lot of track as we call it, and the programmers would try to fit the AI into the existing maps. What we did the second year was we built the AI in very constrained environments that...
No, mejor, esto no es Half-Life Alpha versión 0.52, ¿eh? Esto es otra build de algo, tío.
Showcase the AI. Let's make the ideal space for the AI and then give that to the level designers to incorporate those elements into their map so that it worked better and was more interesting. And that Gargantua was an example of that. And the grunts especially.
Yeah, we had the AI that Steve had been working on, and he had designed all these interesting encounters with them just in his test map, and so he had them up high and down low, and so basically we just sort of re-leveraged that and say, okay, let's start where the player comes in low and there's a Marine on the same level, and then the next one they're up high and then they come running down, because it was really neat to see them retreat. They'd try to run back up the stairs and try to flank you from another side.
Steve Bond, like I mentioned earlier, was this really young guy who had been making mods in Quake C, really the designer for so much of the AI. I mean, all the stuff that's good about the.
A ese tío es el que hay que preguntarle porque dejan los secular en el suelo y se
A
vuelan.
little bit of a language we could sort of use to say, you know, this is a place they can climb. This is a place they can jump to. This is a good place to hide. These are good places to go in general, or interesting places. So, you know, the AI had a little bit of help. We were trying to build something that utilized, you know, the train technology that Jay was working on. And we thought, well, let's give the player something that they can control, but in a limited way. We couldn't do vehicles like you see in Half-Life 2. So we did this, the most constrained vehicle we could think of, which was the train. Players didn't always bring the train with them. And so you had a bunch of these poor people walking down these tunnels.
Oh, is that why you electrified the
And
rail?
yeah, and the rails were, that was part of the
Kept
feedback.
dying from that.
Part of the feedback was, well, you can just bypass all that, so we made the rails electric. It's like, well, maybe that'll teach them to bring the train with them. But the basic idea was, you know, let's explore that and then also reveal some of the hidden deep parts of the base, you know, the abandoned areas where you might get a lot more of the Zen creatures. You know, we had designed some of the ones that didn't make it into the game to appear there, you know, bats that would dive bomb you and while you're on the
bats iban a aparecer en...
We also tried
en
hard to not make it
raíles.
feel like it was the super linear thing, so we tried to give little branches, and so there were some challenges there.
Poquita vida tienes, ¿eh?
Well, there's a really good sketch that Kelly Bailey made, which basically charted surface tension, and it was pretty extensive. Like, it went through the cliffside, and it went through areas where tanks were, and like a lot of soldier holdouts. Yeah, it even went through the desert with the cactuses and the helicopters, and then across a dam. It was pretty extensive. Yeah, when I saw that sketch, I was so motivated to just start building all of that stuff.
So I ran ahead with a lot of level design and a lot of geometry, and it seems like a lot of it stuck in some way or another, which is really amazing. I did the dam, which was funny. I just did that in a day. Like, it was like about 4 or 5 hours. I did a Hoover Dam thing because I like the Hoover
Gente, se
Dam.
han sacado una nueva versión de Half-Life. Entra en los GOTY. No, porque ya han salido los nominados. Lástima. GOTY para el año que viene, gente.
Holy crap, this is perfect.
Una vez más. El último GOTY, ¿te imaginas? 2024, último GOTY de Half-Life.
Places you would like to normally dodge a grenade, but you can't.
And that's the moment. That's really the big part of that level, is that reveal. And the play is kind of supports it afterward. Yeah. The helicopter comes in, you're fighting the helicopter, which is awesome.
First of all, I had a bunch of textures, and then every time I made new ones, whoever was working on the new levels would be like, "Oh, fresh textures! I'm going to use those." Somebody making another level would start using them, and I was like, "No, this is chaos. We need to restrict this." So I started naming the texture sets by the level that they were made for. I was trying to enforce some sort of like visual cohesion, and so that really ended up working.
There was one level I did, it was the introduction of the sort of the bounce pads, the alien bounce pads in the real world. Because, you know, story-wise, like, okay, you're getting closer to hitting the alien world. So I was, well, let's get a little bit of alien world infection into the real world. So I had done it just as a visual thing. John Guthrie made it 10 times better. And that's actually where he found the photo of my daughter, because I didn't put my daughter in Gordon's locker. I hid her in like this destroyed office someplace.
Okay,
you know,
gente,
as a
misterio
little
resuelto.
Easter egg for myself, and John went and put my daughter's photo in Gordon's locker, which I think was a good decision.
Misterio resuelto, gente. Es la hija del tío ese.
I still get questions about stuff that I spent 5 minutes on 25 years ago from people who've now thought about this for 25 years.
¿Qué dice? Ya pasan 50 minutos, acabamos de empezar.
The development went into this. I'm like, on some level, when you start talking about lore, I'm like, well, there's Black Mesa. That was just a matter, we needed a name for something that was evocative.
In that entrance, when you get off the train and there's that lobby where there's a big map on it, And when we were making that map, that was fairly early on, I put a dot in New Mexico. And then that turned into, I think Mark saw that and he was like, oh, where is that? This is where we are. And then he named it Black Mesa.
That is a favorite thing of mine, actually. If you come up with a name for something, and it evokes something, then you don't have to.
Mesa Diablo.
It's because it's a conspiracy.
Mira esos nombres, tío. Stand Bassi, Diablo Plains, Fertile Plains, Black Mesa. Mesa Diablo.
And it evokes something, then you don't have to write the whole story. It's because it's a conspiracy plot. Everybody knows more about it than you do, so you don't have to answer those questions. You just keep raising questions and make the mystery kind of thing.
Like dialogue came in later. Also, a lot of the scripted sequences came in later, and those helped to kind of sharpen the storytelling aspect of it because, I mean, setting expectations to get up to the surface and then like, oh no, they're not here to help us.
The whole thing about diegetic writing, right? Like keeping the exposition in the game.
Ese tío me parece que es el más joven de todos.
A lot of credit to Mark.
After playtests, we'd realized that maybe you need more of a dialogue cue about something.
That's when we started to do like scientists who were literally pop up in a corner and go that way. There's a few of those that we stuck in right at the end when we'd like, well, we get one more session with Hal. He can say, go down here, go around that corner.
Well, so much for the government. Their idea of containment is to kill everyone associated with the project. Judging from your hazard suit, I'd say you were part of what went wrong.
I knew Hal from San Francisco as an artist, cartoonist. He was also an animator and an actor in some science fiction movies. So when we got down to the wire, we did a bunch of voice casting.
Lleva la típica corbatita esa del General Sanders.
I want you to at least talk to people here so they can hear your voice. And I got him on a speakerphone, and I had a bunch of people gathered in my office. And I'm like, okay, Hal, everybody's here. And he's like, well, what would you like me to say? And everybody was like, this is him. This is the guy.
Why do we all have to wear these ridiculous ties?
Another interesting voice thing was the G-Man.
La voz de G-Man.
We liked Mike Shapiro's work, so we knew we wanted to use him, but we brought him in to do Barney and also the G-Man. So we did a take on all the G-Man lines with kind of a straight voice, and it was thinking that, okay, we have something safe, but we're not super excited about it, and give us something else. And he does this crazy lizard voice.
The border world, then, is in our control for the time being, thanks to you. Quite a nasty piece of work you managed over there. I am impressed.
And we took it back, and everybody just loved the crazy lizard voice, and so that's how it worked out.
Did you do the Nihilanth?
I did.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Nihilanth. Just imagine his head floating in space as a baby.
I went into Gabe's office and I demanded Gabe to either fire Ken or I quit. And Gabe just laughed at me.
Correct response from Gabe.
Yeah, I was like, oh.
Until Bill got there, I was the oldest guy there. It was hard because, I had to go home in the evenings, whereas the young guys who just moved out from Florida or wherever, they did not have to go home in the evenings. I'd go home, see my kids. When they were in bed, I would come back down the hill to Valve. Nobody else I worked with had to get up to get their kids off to school in the morning, but I did.
You're wired to just take full advantage of the situation. You put everything into it. So when we say we worked 18-hour days, that's no exaggeration.
Yeah.
Not at all. I can edit all day. I can design all day. I don't have to worry about anything. Two guys from Microsoft start a game studio with a bunch of incredibly capable team. You're gonna push yourself harder than ever before.
I don't usually crunch real hard. I get it done in I come in, I work, I go home, and a lot of people were living really long hours. The classic. Well, I'll come in at 1 and then goof around for a while and then work late into the late at night. I was employee 17. There was a woman that was the kind of the office manager, and eventually Mona Lisa Guthrie came in at the desk. I was the only woman on the team. That was not awesome.
I decided to become a baseball fan here after the birth of my first daughter. So she's the one in Gordon's locker, Isabel. But she was, she's very special needs. She's 25 today. Cognitively, she's about 3 years old. So, so after her birth, in the middle of Half-Life production, it was really hard. It was really hard because we were getting about 2 hours of sleep at a stretch because she had to be fed through a tube in her stomach every 2 hours. I had just a difficult time relating to the world when she was a baby. I had a hard time just talking to people because I was just kind of tired and angry all the time. Yeah, my wife, she worked at Valve for a while. She did a bunch of textures for the game. Like I said, she did those soda machines. She did just a bunch of level textures. She textured Big Mama, the sort of boss creature. She textured him. But when Isabel arrived, she obviously had a lot of issues. So Yachts had to stop working and stay with her at home. And it was the last year of Half-Life, and we pretty much crunched that whole year. So I was at work a lot. It was hard. It was definitely a hard year.
Capítulo 8. Zen.
Games have often had this thing where they're just a little too attached to Star Wars, Blade Runner, Aliens. So it wasn't that hard to try to get people to go, let's think of something really alien. Like what Zen was initially was you're gonna go inside a huge alien organism and kill it or figure out how to turn it on or off or something like that. I didn't know we couldn't actually do that or what was involved.
What does it mean to have alien architecture or a planet that's biologically defining the structures in it, as opposed to what the tools were good at, which is making rectangles?
And then slowly it scaled back till it was more and more corridors, and that everybody was really good at.
People were finishing up stuff and I was still working on Zen because it was like it went through a lot of iteration, or at least we're trying to figure out what it was. Different people were taking swings at it, either in static
Weren't
concepts.
you under a bit of a timeline crunch for it as well?
Yeah, it was the end of the game.
Yeah.
I wanted to cut stuff out and they're like, no, leave it in. I'm
Right.
like, yeah, but I don't have any support for this. Right. And then after a lot of it was built, it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna change the gravity and give you a jump pack. That came later. And I was like, ah.
There's a lot of stuff, especially in Zen, where you're getting...
Para nada. Te has puesto los trucos del no target para grabar esto, pero para nada.
There's a lot of stuff, especially in Zen, where you're getting close to a first draft of some things, right? Because we just didn't have time, and we got to the end of the game, and so we considered not going to Zen, but the art concepts people did were so cool.
For the Zen textures, I was deeply inspired by electron microscope imagery, and we had so much of that regular structural texture material that I wanted to do something more organic. Insects as well. I think there's a lot of textures that were based on beetles. That was really fun and incredibly challenging levels to make because that editor was not friendly for organic shapes.
I built the little behaviors for the tree that hits you if you get too close, and the light stalk that kind of hides. But Ken did a bunch of AIs there, the floating controller guys.
And the flying guys were great, but you had to set up air nodes for them to travel properly. I prototyped a lot, and some of those prototypes were used in the final battle, I believe, and also for the Gonard, which I think Randy did.
We, at some point, have to stop polishing. At some point, we have to, it is what it is. And if the player hasn't had fun up until that point, well, then we failed. They're not going to get to that point, so who cares? It just has to finish, and it did.
Yeah, and there's always Half-Life 2 to win them back.
I love that sensation of being alone in an alien dimension, but the experience that people really liked in the game was scientists pop up and Barney pops up and you have companions and you have this feeling of companionship around you with all the other stuff that's going on. So a lot of people missed that, which I understood, and I think if we'd had thought about the ending from the beginning, we would have figured out some ways to do that a little more.
Se fueron de vacaciones a México para celebrar el lanzamiento de Half-Life.
I remember coming back from downtown Cabo very drunk and then running to the beach, but didn't know there was like a 6-foot retaining wall there, so I just went right over. And then I was hurting so much I slept the night where I fell. Yeah, I woke up the next morning.
I had never heard that
a really
story.
Stiff neck.
Oh my God. It's a good thing you were pretty young.
I remember after we'd gone final on the game, I was home one morning, taking a shower, and my wife asked me, like, it's done. Is it any good? Is the game any fun? Like, I don't know. Like, I hope so.
I don't think it's exaggerating by saying if any one of the crew had disappeared for a month, we wouldn't have shipped. It didn't matter who they were. Everybody was mission critical.
My inspiration from Valve, what I really took away with me was that the thing that is most important to me is what are we making? Coming in as a texture artist, you don't have a lot of expectation that you're going to get to influence that. And I was able to have quite a bit of influence on the what.
It was so fun to work with the people who were making Half-Life. The collection of people were diverse, at least like in their professional backgrounds, was kind of all over the place. And so figuring out how to work with all those people, but also just the fact that we had hired really stellar people who were good at collaborating, like the conscientious people, deeply passionate about what they wanted to do. That just was a recipe for a professionally, like, really good time.
It seems to me that one of the things that good games do is make 2 games worth of stuff and then throw away the bad game.
Lo que le pasaba a Esfera, ¿no?
Like, Valve was able to do that. A lot of companies couldn't do that, but backstopped by Gabe and Mike, Valve could afford to do that.
I always have absolutely nothing interesting to say when people say, would you reflect on your legacy? Like, I really don't look back a whole lot. I'm always excited by the future, right? So to me, it's like I can look back at the things we did, but to me, they're just sort of like the stepping stones to what we're going to be able to do in the future. That's just how I'm wired, right?
Este es el mapa que se abría eso del suelo y podías hacer caer a la gente. El Team Fortress Classic. El Counter. Tío, ¿y el Ricochet? Blue Shift. Opposing Force. Qué curioso, Valve haciendo mención a las expansiones, tío. Y el Ricochet, gente. Se acabó. Secret Tape. Estos serán los que han hecho el documental. Madre mía, loco. Vale, vale. Ah, vale, coño. Vale. Vale, y van el motociclista espacial y sus amigos, ahora disponibles en Half-Life Deathmatch. Hostia, no lo hemos visto. Ok, se acabó, gente. Vamos a ver... Vamos a poner musiquilla de nuevo. Vamos a ver si continúa de nuevo con lo que tenía, la lista de reproducción que tenía yo antes. Vamos a ver, gente. Han eliminado Half-Life Source, ¿vale? Mira, aquí tenemos las notas del parche. Vamos a ver si están en español. Hace una hora. No sé si lo han vuelto a actualizar el Half-Life. Aquí no aparece, desde luego. Vamos a ver, biblioteca. ¿Lo estáis viendo, no? Sí. Vale, página de la tienda. ¿Hay algo nuevo? No. ¡Ah, mira! Aquí está. Vamos a ver las notas del parche, gente. No lo eliminaron, está oculto en la tienda. Ahora nos ponemos con eso. Vamos a ver esto. Vamos a ver, está en inglés, por desgracia. Voy a traducirlo a mi manera. Vamos a ver. Lanzamos Half-Life el 19 de noviembre de 1998. Estamos muy orgullosos de lo que construimos allá por el entonces y estamos muy agradecidos con la comunidad de jugadores que lo han estado disfrutando desde entonces. El juego no ha recibido mucha atención en los años recientes, en los últimos años, como otros juegos de nuestro catálogo. Así que pensamos en esa meta, que esa meta sería una gran oportunidad para la experiencia de jugador y añadir nuevas formas de jugar el juego. El mismo juego que jugaste en 1998, restaurado, aumentado y revitalizado. Hemos creado una nueva página web que vamos a ir ahora. Vale, ahora lo veremos. Pero aquí está lo importante, vamos. Actualizados los gráficos. Bueno, la configuración de gráficos, incluido correcciones de iluminación y una actual campo de vista para el widescreen que hay ahora. Vale, controller y Steam Network Support. Esto no sé qué significa. Steam Network Support. Lo que sea. Steam Deck Support oficialmente verificado. Bien. También incluye un montón de cosas nuevas o restauradas. La actualización 25 aniversario incluye el Half-Life Uplink, ¿vale? Y 4 mapas multijugador. También hemos restaurado algún contenido para los verdaderos buscadores de nostalgia, incluido el menú original, ¿vale? Y algún early. Ah, vale, lo de te está diciendo los modelos para el multijugador del Barney, vale. Surfing, vale, aquí te están invitando a el vídeo de YouTube que acabamos de ver, ¿vale? Con nuestros compañeros de Secret Tape, vale. Gracias a todos por estos 25 años de Half-Life. Para todos aquellos nuevos al juego, Half-Life está disponible gratis este fin de semana. Píllalo y quédatelo para siempre. Además de descuentos en toda la franquicia. Vamos a ver, vamos a notas de cambio. Nuevo contenido verificado en Steam Deck. Half-Life Uplink, la demo. Ha sido añadido el juego. No le han metido la traducción por alguna razón. Ya hemos visto que estaba roto. Han añadido 4 mapas: Deathmatch, Contaminación, Pool Party, Disposal y Rocket Frenzy. Añadido 3 antiguos mapas de Half-Life Deathmatch que estaban disponibles en el CD de tal Double Cross y SendM, ¿vale? Añadido Iván, el Barney prototipo y Skeleton. Y el hombre de demasiada cafeína como modelos para el Half-Life multijugador. Añadido docenas de nuevos sprites, ¿vale? Añadido soporte para Steam Networking. ¿Estos serán para los servidores actuales? Permitiendo un fácil acceso de multijugador. Ah, vale. Que puedes invitar a la gente desde el chat y todo eso y funciona bien, vamos. Añadido soporte para Steam... permitiendo a tus amigos seguirte tu aventura por un lado. ¿Esto es cooperativo? ¿Han metido un cooperativo? ¿O es como una especie de... ¿Qué es esto, gente? ¿O esto es para que puedas streamear a tus amigos desde Steam o algo? Vamos a ver, nostalgia. Hemos traído el vídeo de introducción de Valve. Puede ser skipado con el Novit comando, ¿vale? El menú principal. Cambiaron los modelos por defecto a los originales no HD. Vale. Mejorada la física, gameplay, vamos a ver. Mejoradas físicas lanzando granadas. Mejoradas los spawns random en multijugador. Mejoradas los controles del C4, ¿vale? El disparo primario ahora siempre tira una nueva carga y el secundario siempre detona. arreglado, pues, entidades empujables basados en frame rate. Eso era lo de que cuando había un NPC sobre un tren parpadeaba. Quiero pensar que es eso. Arreglado jugadores con altos frames congelándose en el lugar de la muerte de un jugador. Vale, estos son cosillas. Arreglado algunos casos donde el jugador podía estar atrapado en algunos niveles al hacer transición entre niveles, entre mapas. Vale. Arreglados algunos casos donde los jugadores podían interrumpir diálogos importantes dándole a la E, vamos. Arreglado la vista de Bob, ángulos de la vista de Bob de las armas. No sé qué significa eso. No sé si es el zoom de la ballesta o algo así. No sé a qué se refiere. Arreglados los barriles rojos al principio de la... de superficie de extensión que no se lanzaban como... los que vuelan. ¿Sabes que hay unos cuantos para ahí que explotan y ahí unos vuelan? Pues algo así han arreglado, no sé por qué. Han arreglado a los Snarks ataque... que los Snarks atacaran a unas entidades que eran de... que no eran enemigos, vamos. Ok, ni sabía que eso existía. Sabía lo del objeto que es una aguja. Que eso me parece que era un error del Opposing Force. Vale, no parece nada importante. Sin auto apuntado. Nada. Cohetes. Incorrecto, tal. Sí, estos son errores. Errores y tal. Cambios de interfaz. El menú ya lo hemos visto. Mira, ahora para los mods, las imágenes de fondo soportan hasta una resolución de 3840 por 1600. La interfaz dentro del juego ahora usa doble o triple... vale, que soporta mayor resolución. Sí, ya lo hemos visto gigante. Diálogos... Vale... Vale, que se mantiene en su sitio la interfaz del HV. Vale, esto lo hemos visto, que puedes verlo, el filtrado de texturas. Puedes poner los píxeles como eran antes. Vale. Sí, esto ya lo hemos visto. Actualizado el menú de pausa. Vale. El menú de la plataforma de Steam ha sido eliminado. Vale. Vale. Eliminado. Ahora muy necesario. Calidad de vídeo muy baja. Cambios de entrada. Vale. Mejorar el soporte para teclados y navegación en cualquier sitio. Añadido latencia de bajo rango será esto. Esto algunos juegos lo tienen. Sincronizan la CPU y la GPU para reducir el tiempo entre entrada y salida. Vale. Básicamente lo hemos reescrito todo, básicamente. Si esto es para el mando, vale. Balance multijugador. Incrementado el daño de la ametralladora. Bueno. ¡Hostia! La ametralladora ahora empieza con ¡Hostia, chaval! 25 años después lo han arreglado. La ametralladora empieza con el cargador completo. Cuando la pillas. Los jugadores ya no tiran sus armas. Vale. Ok, renderizado. No hay Vulcan al final, tío. Sigue con el OpenGL. Vale. Default Resolution. Vale, Skyboxes. Vale. Mira. Mejoras del motor para los creadores de mods. Incrementa el límite número de canales de sonido. el máximo, el texto máximo que puedes meter, entidades, eso está muy bien, ¿eh? Vale, pues para build, archivos de localización actualizados. Sí, ya hemos visto que no, como en el uplink, tío, que no hay. Miscellaneous security fixes. Ay, el mando. Notas. La versión previa del juego ha sido archivada al público, visible en una rama beta llamada Steam Legacy, ¿vale? Es lo que hemos visto al principio del directo. Con la descripción vale, bien. O sea, la versión clásica. Para los mods, vale. Ok. Por si algún modder no quiere actualizarlo a la nueva versión, pues que pueda la gente ponerse en la versión antigua. Ojo, importante, esto es lo del Source. Consideramos que esta versión aniversario de Half-Life va a ser la versión definitiva y a la que continuaremos dándole soporte a partir de ahora. Así que vamos a reducir la visibilidad de Half-Life Source en la tienda de Steam. Sabemos que los assets de Half-Life Source todavía son usados para el Source Engine, la comunidad del Source Engine, así que continuarán siendo disponibles. Pero recomendamos a los nuevos jugadores que jueguen esta versión en vez de Half-Life Source. Vale. O sea que Half-Life Source lo sigo teniendo, ¿no? No me jodas, vale, lo he escrito mal. Me lo han quitado de la puta lista, tío. Hostia, no la tenía instalado y me lo han... Ah, está aquí, tío. Vale. Sigue aquí. Ok. Falsa alarma. Digo, me la han quitado de la puta... Ah, mira, ya sale aquí. Vale. Voy a verificar ficheros por si acaso. Idioma, español de España, vale. Por cierto, no hay español latino, ¿no? No. Vale, verifica de nuevo por si acaso y vamos a ver la web esta bien montado. Dios. Mira, hijos de puta. Chupándose las pollas entre ellos, ahí poniendo todos los juegos, todos los premios. Valve te invita a experimentar Half-Life 25 Aniversario Update. Hostias. El nuevo mapa. Esto es solo nuevo mapa multi, ¿no? Los 4 esto. Mira el Skeleton, tío. Ok. Aquí el documental. Half-Life Uplink, vale. 4 nuevos multijugador, Contamination, ni puta idea. Son mapas nuevos, diseñados por Valve para esta versión, tío. Contaminación. Pool Party. Supongo que esto te curará. Si estás aquí en medio, te dejan expuesto, pero te curas. ¡Hostia! Esto implica lore, gente. Disfruta un relajante estancia en un complejo abandonado de Zen. Construido alrededor de un clúster de... Sí, de piscinas de estas curativas. ¿Cómo puedes respirar aquí? No importa. Disposal. Área 3, masiva radioactiva y guaste blanco nequied, vale. Esto sí que es blanco mesa. Ok. Esto puede ser incluso antes de ese sitio de Black Mesa, que hay un río de esta mierda. Rocket Frenzy. Y esto es antes del cohete. Dios santo. Vale. Uy, scaling. Hasta 4K. Mírate, es pequeñito aquí arriba, tío. Esto lo tendré que configurar fuera de cámara porque no sé cómo, porque salía una interfaz gigante. Esto lo tengo que tocar y mañana le daremos caña, ¿eh? Mañana le daremos caña a multijugador. Pero bastante grande, bastante fuerte le vamos a dar. Curioso, como el Iván sale todo pixelado, pero el barniz sale bien. Mira. El 19 de noviembre, que hijos de puta. En el 1999, Valve sacó un CD llamado Further Data a las tiendas. Y vamos a incluir mucho de ese contenido. Double Cross, Dust Mill, SendDM, que por cierto, eso se pareció mucho a un mapa de Ricochet. Este es el Cafeína Man, ¿no? Y el esqueleto. Anda que no recuerda al puto güey el esqueleto, tío. Docenas de sprays. Ok. Bueno. Y esto es lo que hemos visto en la web. En Steam, vamos. Fondos de pantalla. Oh, qué bueno. Los fondos en HD, tío. Están guapísimos, tío. Ah, la grava no es... What the fuck? Qué grande. Y ya está. No sabía que esto tenía web, tío, el Half-Life. Mira esta calidad, papi. Dios. Dios, en HD. Buah, chaval. Buah. Anda, que no mola esta shit, tío. Pégale al jefe que está al inicio de la página. Voy. Por si acaso. Ah, mira.
Oh no, Michael, slowing it down. Something smells quite foul.
No lo matas, tío. Manda un logro. Mantén la página segura del Hellcry y el zombie. No, chaval, vete tú a saber cuántos premios habrá.
Sorry, I'm leaving now.
Nah, esto no puede hacer nada porque no son... Ok. Pues creo que esto ha sido todo, gente. Mira, está aquí muerto. Se ha caído de arriba abajo. Vale. No sabía que tenía esto web, tío. Un experimento sale terriblemente mal y desencadena consecuencias imprevistas. Bueno. Perdimos la guerra de las 7 horas. La Tierra se rindió. El incidente de Black Mesa es un recuerdo lejano. No sabía que había... Esta web es nueva, gente. Episodio 1, episodio 2, Half-Life Alyx. Ciudad 17 está al borde del colapso. Es una carrera contra reloj para salvar a la humanidad. Fuck. Ciudad 17 está destruida, pero la alianza no se ha rendido y tampoco Gordon Freeman. Está de hace tiempo, ahora me entero, tío. O sea... Esto sí que me suena de verlo. La lucha contra la alianza comienza. Eres Alex Vance y está a punto de encender la mecha de una revolución. Ok. Vamos a ver si han puesto algo más por aquí. No, creo que ya está, ¿eh? Está todo... Ha lanzado ya el... Esto es Neon Prime, por cierto. No sé por qué lo estoy mirando. Vamos a ver. Yo tendré que dejarlo ahora porque montaré un vídeo rápido para avisar a la gente y tal. Mira, aquí esto es lo que han puesto hace una hora. Vale, aquí están anunciando la web. Vale, voy a darle un retuitazo. Esto también le va a dar un retuitazo. Vale. Secretos, sí, siempre. En Steam supongo que habrán hecho retweet o algo, ¿o no? No. Ni siquiera se han hecho, yo qué sé, tío. Ponte aquí el tal. Y de la deck, no sé si han dicho algo. No, no han dicho nada. Gente, mañana, ya sabes, a la hora de siempre, vamos a darnos unos buenos madrazos de puta madre en el multijugador, los mapas nuevos, ¿eh? Yo ahora lo voy a dejar porque me voy a montar un vídeo cortito para avisar a la gente. Y creo que poco más. No sé si me ha avisado... No sé si me habéis dicho a alguien algo. A ver, que mira aquí a la gente de confianza. Un segundo, gente. No, vale, creo que ya lo hemos visto todo lo que han dicho y tal. Así que nada, gente. Pues nada, esto ha sido el 25 aniversario que Vale está montando. No sé si sacarán algo más. No creo que saquen nada más, porque mañana es sábado, mañana en Val ya no trabajan. El domingo tampoco. El lunes no sé si sacarán algo más. Pero no lo sé, tío. A ver si esto... Ahora esperar el 50 aniversario. Toda la razón, tío. Así que esto se ve que lo han... Esto tendré que verlo esta noche para... A ver si es que lo han cambiado y ahora y lo han complicado. Porque antes usaban el peer-to-peer para el tema de... Hostia, es que se ve a 60 FPS este fondo, ¿eh? Hijos de puta, tío, qué grandes. Qué grandes. Bueno, mira, espérate. BBB Barney. Iván Gordon, Helmet, Iván. Ahí está el señor Iván. Skeleton. Y el Cafeinaman este. Bueno, gente, Espero que disfrutéis de puta madre esta noche dándole cañita al multijugador. Mañana ya sabéis, tenéis una cita aquí para darle todos juntos. Y creo que poco más. Así que vamos a ver que preparo esto para la despedida. Gente, 25 aniversario. Felicidades a todo el mundo. Y por cierto, Napa, muchas gracias por esta donación. Que no te he hecho caso antes con el hype. Gente, lo he dicho, muchísimas gracias por estar aquí y nos vemos en el siguiente vídeo directo. Chao, chao, besitos para todos. ¡Mua!
A very